Welcome to A to Z Jobs, the podcast that delves into the fascinating world of careers, one profession at a time.
In each episode, we'll deep dive into a specific profession, exploring its history, requirements, challenges, and rewards.
So get ready to expand your horizons, challenge your perceptions, and discover a world of possibilities. I'm Roxy,
And I'm Nate.
and we're excited to host you on this journey.
In this week's episode, you'll meet Rachel, who has a passion for beekeeping that will inspire you to want to do the same. Nobody's career journey is straightforward, but Rachel's is unique. We'll learn how she went from being a pilot to a beekeeper.
Hi, Rachel. Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for taking up your evening. So let's jump straight into the first question and find out what you do for a living.
I do a few things for a living. I am primarily at the moment a full-time beekeeper. I run a beekeeping business that has a few components. So I do personal coaching, or you could call it mentoring. I also take workshops, both in one of our local businesses. I use that as a base and I have hives there. But I also go into schools and do school workshops for kids, preschool and primary school predominantly. And I sell my honey. I tend to my hives. And so I'm working sort of across the platform in terms of education in the space of beekeeping. It's a growing area in terms of interest. So I'm finding it really fun and really varied. So that's primarily my job. And then the other thing that I do is I oversee the running of a business in Bali, which is a family villa business. It's one villa. I did pre-COVID. I used to run it also with retreats. So we do mums and daughters retreats and dads and sons retreats, mums retreats, all sorts of things like that. But then COVID hit. So we sort of had to, everything came to a grinding halt for a while, but we managed to keep the same staff on who were like family to us. So that's been really nice for them to be able to come back and actually have people in the villa rather than just living there in an empty villa. And so I oversee the running of that. So I've got 3 staff there, and that's a really nice thing just to have as an extra source of income. And then until recently, I was running and overseeing a charity, which we're just in the process of winding up now, which is a youth mental health charity. So we're just in the final stages of wrapping that up. And lastly, I'm I guess, full-time mum in that I have 3 children who are in high school, and I thought it was going to get easier, but it seems to get busier and busier as time goes on because they're just into everything, lots of activities, but it's less about, making lunches and washing their clothes and more about being mum's taxi and just being in the car constantly driving. So luckily I have jobs that are fairly flexible, so I can kind of work from the car while I'm driving the kids to netball, etc. So yes, a few different things there that fill my day.
That's brilliant. Lots of hats. It's incredible.
Which part of Bali is your villa?
Jimbaran Bay. So
yeah.
just south of the airport. So you head down to the little bottleneck before the bulge at the bottom of the island. And it's on the western side. So it's right on the beach, nice and quiet. A couple of nice hotels there. The Four Seasons and I think the Intercon are still there. So we're close to them. So a slightly older crowd, but it's much quieter and a little bit more local.
Yeah.
So you have the local fish markets, which are the stinkiest fish markets I've ever been to in Asia, but they're very authentic. And all the locals flock down to the beach at 5 o'clock in the evening, and the Indonesian kids, or the Balinese kids specifically, swim or just go in sort of knee deep or waist deep in all their clothes. And that's their time to sort of have their bathing. So you really feel part of the local culture when you're seeing it all the time, and there's ceremonies in all the back streets that you can wander through. So it's not as touristy as other parts of Bali. So that's a bit more of a, I guess, richer cultural experience.
My parents-in-law, they're retired, but they're actually moving to Bali for a year. They're leasing a place up at the top of Bali. I can't remember the name, but it's where all the dolphins are. They're renting a villa up there for a year. But yeah, it'd be good to have some contacts down the other part of Bali as well. So I'll hit you up for those villa details.
Yes, yes, I'll give you the website.
Definitely. And then maybe when we're actually up and running properly as a career coaching business, we can run a retreat with you guys.
There you go. Yes, I have done a couple. I have had a couple of corporate retreats in there actually. There was a writers' retreat once from Singapore, and they had a really lovely time. Just needed to get away to be able to sit down and get in the headspace of writing in a
That's
nice
amazing.
villa. So yeah, it's that's a lovely thing to have on the side.
Definitely. I do love the sound of, parents' retreats and mums and daughters and just having those specifics is brilliant.
So with all those different hats and all those different things, what's an average? Do you have an average day? What does a day look like for you?
Um, so what does a day look like for me? I still haven't mastered the art of balance. I'm still working on that. I'm in my 50s now, and I think I'm still figuring out balance. But I do feel that as we get older, we do get better at prioritizing our own health. In that process of what comes into a normal day. So I'm thinking about that because the weather's just getting warmer here in Kiama now, and I've just set a new regime this week that if I want to have my morning coffee, I have to go for a swim in the ocean first. So I'm doing my ocean swim and then I'm having my coffee, and then I feel better. I feel good about myself. Always try and do a bit of exercise in the morning. And then the day hits with the ground running of anything of a number of different things. So, for example, today I was up at the local primary school at 7:45 this morning to take 3 kids who are the lucky ones that get chosen for that particular day to put bee suits on and go and have a look in a real hive at the primary school. Generally, the grade 5s and 6s are the ones that get to do that, but they've actually introduced a whole bee education program as part of a bigger garden program at the school, and they've got a lot of space to do it, so it's actually really wonderful.
That's
So I
amazing.
was up there this morning doing that to get in early before the heat hit. And then after that, I had to go straight to a client's house to help him do a split on a hive because his bees are getting too big in volume. There's too many bees. We needed to basically split the hive, and I take half the box away, which I did. And then I brought that back to the house and then remembered that I hadn't had breakfast and it was already lunchtime. So then I decided to kind of have brunch. And then I was out the door again to go and pick up a queen bee from someone who's a queen breeder and deliver that to some other hives that I have close by to here about 5 minutes away, put that queen in, and then back to the school to deliver a bit of equipment that they needed. And then just in time to pick up the kids off the bus from school. So in any day, I could be in a bee suit at my desk, reading emails, trying to update the website, write a blog. I could be struggling doing my Instagram posts, trying to edit a video that I always always struggle with, to do my Instagram feeds, which obviously is part and the parcel of running a business. You have to keep that going to keep your audience engaged. I could be on the phone to my staff in Indonesia, and lots of phone calls. A lot of people will call me and ask questions about bees. And I also have plenty of phone calls with collaborators being anyone from the local worm farmer to the local nursery to a local shopping centre that wants me to come in and do a workshop, or a school that wants to talk to me about how I might do a workshop at their place. So very varied. Lots of time in the car, but also lots of time out in nature. And I think the thing that I love about it is that no day is ever the same. There is not one single element of me ever saying my life is like that movie Groundhog Day, because it's just not boring at all. It's always interesting. So yeah, not your usual career, I guess you could say.
Oh, it sounds great. You've got a really good mix. You're teaching kids, you're helping the world, you're getting stuck in with the local community. It sounds like a dream to me.
How much maintenance is a beehive? Like, how much time actually do you have to spend hiving things?
Mm. Yeah, it's a good question. It's a lot more than people think. Um, had I known how much work was involved, I might not have taken it up initially. I think I probably would have been a little bit more organised, better educated, done a few more courses, had a mentor, all of the things that I'm now trying to help my clients with that I didn't have when I started. So I was constantly on the back foot. If you're on the front foot and you're organised, it's not actually that time consuming. But for example, I average out for most hives over the course of an average year, weather wise, which of course we don't have anymore. So everything's changing all the time. But if we were to have a normal year, it would probably be 12 inspections over the course of a year. So one a month on average. And each of those inspections would take, say, 2 hours. So 2 12s, 24 hours. That's for the maintenance of the bees. Then outside that comes maintenance of the boxes, cleaning of equipment. Beekeeping's a really messy profession. You've got wax that's sticky and gets everywhere and you can't get it out of anything. Then you've got propolis, which is the most powerful glue on the planet. It's incredible um, in terms of being a natural glue anyway. And that is so sticky, it just gets into everything. And then, of course, you've got honey, which brings ants and all sorts of other critters. So it's a messy business. So then you need hot water and then you need other equipment to do the cleaning. And then you realize that no one ever told you that you actually needed a big hot tub to soak everything. And the list kind of keeps growing with the equipment that you need. But I think the key is the more organized you are and the more you've got your lists and you're ahead of the game, you end up being quite effective. And it does take a number of years until you really get into a bit of a rhythm and find that you're being a bit more effective with your time, I think.
To almost learn from your mistakes always. You gotta you get quicker each time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in a way, everyone who gets into it has to learn. That's the best way to learn. But you can save a lot of expense and time and grief having someone kind of coaching you through it, I think, which is something that I didn't have. I learnt the hard way for sure.
Yeah, definitely. We're very good advocates for mentoring. I think that's probably why we wanted to start this podcast, really, is to try and get as much knowledge out there as possible about each job and where to start. So that there's like a little look under the hood. Like what did you wish you knew? How can we help you make a bees 101 to send on to someone and be like, make sure you've got that bathtub full of hot water.
Yeah, and I guess and that's it. And I think the other thing about beekeeping is there are so many different components to it that you can branch out on or focus on. So some people are only keeping bees because they want the wax to make candles because they have a candle business. I've got a lady who is a wedding celebrant and she wants me to pass on my spare wax so that she can make candles using my wax because she'd rather use local wax than import it from Queensland. And then there's other people who are only doing it for the honey. And there are other people who just want to be able to have bees and go and sit in the garden with a cup of tea and just watch them and just have the joy. And then obviously you've got schools that want them because they want the education piece. And also when it's kids, if you don't have the honey, then they'll probably lose interest pretty quickly. So there needs to be a sweetener there. And so I try and teach all of my clients that I mentor and coach that it's really good to have a goal from the get-go, even if that goal is constantly changing, that's fine. You can update the way you operate. But if you don't have a goal, you tend to go off on 10 different tangents and want to try everything at once. And that's when you really get into a mess, because you've got wax over here and you've got propolis, because propolis is a big industry now too for antimicrobial, antibacterial, antifungal, anti this, anti that. So propolis is becoming a real powerhouse in the world of potentially replacing antibiotics, which we're now all becoming, what's the word? Not immune to. We're
Resistance.
losing a resistance. Thank you. So, yeah, that's a big area that I would love to sink my teeth into with some scientists down the track. But again, that takes money and it takes time. So it's about finding, as I give the advice now with beekeeping, try and just find one thing to start with and just focus on that, and try not to get distracted, which is almost impossible when you've got 60,000 bees flying around. There's all this stuff going on and fun things that you're learning. But keeping that focus is key to success, I think. And I've learnt the hard way with that one too.
It's solid advice for any business. Roxy and I are the same. Like, you start a business, you get so excited. There's 100 different directions, and we take it in turns, pulling each other back to our core. We need to just focus on the core for now. Then we can look at the other fun stuff.
So easily distracted, aren't we? So easily distracted.
You have to try and figure out your routine even though you don't have one, and it's the hardest thing. Every day is different, but you've got to sort of work out how you do each process and lock it down so that you can go on to the next one and make it better. But yeah, I mean, it sounds like you have a full array. So you've got clients, you've got kids, you've got the community, you're running your business at the same time with the admin and the social media and working out how to self brand and all of that, which are actually incredibly the same themes for every career now. It's so weird. It's that the people, the self management, and then also the time management and the self branding as well, which is incredible. So, how did you get started in all of this? I know you've got a wonderful career journey. I'd love to know more about that.
How did I get started in beekeeping?
Yeah.
So I moved back to Australia in 2016, and I'd been living in Singapore for 8 years. And Nate, you'll be familiar with the concept of living in high rises with air conditioning and not really going outside too much because it's really hot. Singapore's Groundhog Day. Every day is 33 degrees, 80% humidity, and you get thunderstorms hitting from 3 o'clock.
Typhoon season and all that.
Yeah, yeah. So living indoors a lot, although we did live across the road from the Botanic Gardens in Singapore, which were just glorious. But you could only really go to them first thing in the morning and last thing in the afternoon because it did get quite hot. But living in that world of air conditioning, I always found a bit stifling because you didn't have that escape from it, because if you go outside, you're just melting. And then you'd go to the supermarket, the air-conditioned supermarket, and all of the fruit and vegetables is imported. Everything's from America, from Europe, from Australia. And I always found that hard to get my head around. And then when you look at the map and realize how small Singapore is, like Hong Kong, they don't have the space to grow all the stuff that we can, in Australia. And so they have to import everything, even from China, obviously. Fruit and veg from China, which we always were a bit wary of because of the pesticides and the other things that they would find. But I think for me, it really hit home how lucky we were back in Australia to have our own fruit and vegetables. And at the time, I'd been working through some gut health issues myself, that seemed to evolve over time, and became very, I guess, educated myself on nutrition and gut health. And on the way back home to Australia from Singapore, we travelled through some of the grottiest, tough parts of Asia with our three kids who were only 6 and 8. The twins were 6, the eldest was 8, traveling through Asia to some really hardcore places because we wanted them to see how fortunate they were. And the conditions of the food that they were eating over there really put fire in my belly. And I felt compelled to come back and do something about it, because you'd see these kids who had nothing. We went to an orphanage and lived in an orphanage, and for breakfast they would have, an ice block that was full of raspberry cordial, and that would be it. And just the nutrition, or the lack of nutrition, really, really shocked me. So, of course, I came back to Australia and I thought, right, I'm going to throw myself into a mature age nutrition science degree. I'm going to do a master's in dietetics, and I'm going to find a way to influence government that they have to change our food policy, stop wasting food, and spend more money on aid in Asia to help people and educate them with nutrition and make sure they've got better access to food. So, of course, one of the first subjects, well, not the first subjects, but one of the early subjects in the course in the first year that came up was food security. And I found that really fascinating, because I realised that even in Australia, we actually have big food security issues. I had no idea, especially in the Indigenous communities, but also in remote communities. They don't have access to good quality fruit and vegetables. And I kind of started thinking, you know what? What's the point of telling everyone they've got to eat 5 vegetables and 3 fruit a day if they don't have access to it? And we need to focus more on food security. And simultaneously at that time, one of my friends who'd moved back from Singapore, he'd decided to have a complete life change, I guess a bit like I had done. And he started working for a company up in Byron Bay called Hive, with a father and a son who had invented this amazing thing called a hive, where you could harvest the honey out the back of the hive. And he was working in international operations. So I started just getting curious when I'd see some Facebook posts about this this big drive they were having to do a crowdfunding campaign, which ended up being, was it Indiegogo? I think the most successful Indiegogo crowdfunding campaign to date in the world. They were trying to raise 70,000, and they ended up raising 2 million in 1 hour. It was just off the charts. So I became fascinated with this idea of Flow Hive, and simultaneously was becoming a bit disgruntled with what they were teaching. They were still effectively teaching the food pyramid at university, and I was having to deal with doing group work with 21-year-olds who just wanted to sit on their phones and look at Instagram all day while I did all the work as a mature age with 3 kids. And I was kind of wearing thin a bit. And I thought, you know what? I think I'm going to try something different. I'm going to try and save the world one bee at a time and do something really different. And I actually bought the hive without telling my husband, and just because I wanted to surprise him. And I think when I got it, maybe he thought that I'd gone a little bit crazy. I'm sure. I mean, I think most beekeepers are a little bit crazy, if I'm completely honest. We have to be, right? We're playing with bees all day. And anyway, I got the hive. He was actually fascinated by it, I think, because it's just so different, and he likes anything that's different. So I thought I'd try it, and I tried it, and I had no idea what I was doing. I had done one course, but one course when you don't have a hive and you don't have a mentor to follow up is really in one ear and out the other. There's so much to take on board. So it took me a while to really get into my groove. But I just felt like this had a purpose. Like, I wasn't sitting at my desk trying to do essays and assignments that seemed to just not make sense at all. Just doing this just kind of, it was like a light bulb moment, just going, yes, I'm outside. I'm at people's beautiful properties with views of the ocean in one of the most beautiful parts of the country, doing what I love, learning more about flowers and soil and all of the things that I'd always wanted to learn about and never had. And I just thought, I think this might be it.
You found your niche early. You didn't have to do the degree, and now you're learning on the job, which you could probably teach people so much better because
I
you've
know.
been through it all.
And once I kind of started getting into the education side of it, I thought, well, if I am going to teach others, I better have some form of accreditation. So I'm almost finished my Cert 3 with Tokyo College, which is part of the DPI, Department of Primary Industries, which is a subsidiary of the New South Wales government. So I'm currently doing that, which has been really great. It's very relevant. I love all the content. It all makes sense. So that'll be just good to have that under my belt, to give me a bit more credibility as far as being a coach and a workshop teacher.
Yeah, definitely.
I have a silly question. When you buy a hive, does it come with bees, or do you have to like get your native bees to come to your hive?
That's a great question. So there's two parts. There's native bees and there's honeybees.
Ah, okay.
Native, and both of them essentially come the hive first and the bees come later. Native bees works slightly differently, and it's a fairly niche kind of area, native bees, because the bees operate quite differently. And obviously, being stingless, they're much easier to transport. It's a much smaller hive, and it's a much smaller colony as well. So it's easy to just kind of transport. And then the way they operate is very different. I do want to get into native bees one day, but I've just, like we were talking about before, I'm trying to stick to the plan at the
Yes.
moment,
Yeah.
stay focused. So honeybees is what I'm into, and it's interesting you asked that question because when Flow Hive came onto the market and became the next big thing, their marketing was so good that people actually thought that what you could do is just put a hive in the backyard and miraculously the bees would just come, and then one day you'd just turn the tap and honey would come out and you never had to open it, you never had to do anything. So I think once they became a big success, Flow Hive had to really quickly put some education modules in place, which they did online. To their credit, they've done a great job, because they had to educate people that you actually have to assemble the hive yourself, and then you have to go and find a beekeeper who can sell you bees. So there's a big market. That's another thing I do, actually, sell bees. There's a big market in selling bees, and possibly an even bigger market in selling queens that come in the post. Australia Post deliver the queens, and then we drop them into the hive. There's a few different variations of how bees are purchased, because you can purchase them as a package with just a pile of bees in a box buzzing around without a queen, and she gets slowly integrated into the colony. But the way I do it is you actually buy what we call a nucleus, where it's an established colony with frames, with eggs and pollen and honey, and an established queen. And then you put those frames into your boxes and it gets bigger and bigger. So you basically buy the bees, and there's people like me who are crazy enough to be the transporters of the bees. So I transport the bees to people's houses because people are too scared to put them in their cars or whatever. And of course, I was stupid enough to decide that it was really easy to transport bees in my Kia Carnival, because I've got 3 kids. I had a quite big car, but the kids would always get in the car and say, "Mum, there's still bees in the car." And so we'd be
I'd be
driving along,
terrified.
and the kids would have the windows down trying to get out of the car. And there was honey in the car and there was wax in the car. And I've just sold it yesterday. Someone came to pick it up and I had to get it detailed 3 times to get all the honey and the wax out of the car. So I've now bought myself a ute so that I don't have to have bees in the car. So to answer your question, you basically buy the bees and put them into your box, and then hopefully figure out the rest a short time after that.
You can post a bee.
Yep, they come in the mail.
That's crazy.
So I've got a friend who started for that very reason because it just seems so wrong. She started a business up just down the road from here as a queen breeder. It's a tough gig. It's a lot of work. It's very time restrictive. You've got to be very accurate with your time. And she's selling queen bees that she can take to people's houses and deliver them personally. It's so much better having a local queen. But it's not always possible. Varroa mite is something that has changed that whole landscape now because it's making transporting bees very, very challenging. So we have to be really careful where we're getting queen bees from now. But they're a very valuable commodity because the queen bees are going to be one of the solutions to the Varroa mite problem that we've got if they can build the right genetics into queen bees, they can become Varroa resistant. And it's happening overseas, but it's a long process that can take up to 20 years to build that resistance in. And people have been trying to illegally import queen bees into the country for that very reason, to have the Varroa resistant genetics. And because they're very valuable, obviously puts the price up, right? So someone was trying to make a lot of money out of the genetics, the commodity of genetics in queen bees, and it's gone terribly wrong because they've brought in Varroa mite, and now we have a fairly big problem on our hands to try and grapple with. So the queens, it's all about genetics. If it didn't really matter, and if we could just leave the bees in the hive and they actually make their own queens, we could do that. Then it's not a problem. You don't need to transport queens, but the problem is long term, genetics can change over time. Things can start making them cranky, whether it's weather, whether it's the type of flowers they're on. The queen can get old and cranky. The older they get, the more feisty they get. And so eventually those genetic traits flow through to the colony, and the colony becomes really cranky. And when you've got a cranky colony, it's not fun to work with. So we end up taking the queen out, killing her, and putting a fresh new queen in that we know has got calm genetics. So genetics is a big part of it, which is why transporting queens is a big thing.
You're changing the dictator. You're putting new values in. It's amazing.
Yep. And if we don't kill her first, the colony might kill her. If she starts becoming really rogue, or if she stops laying, the colony will actually ball her up and cook her in a ball to kill her, and then they'll make their own queen. But we intervene in that process if we want to change the trajectory of the genetics.
There's so much to it.
So complicated. This is fantastic.
I've got to say, the only thing I knew about bees before this was that you could actually buy a box for Father's Day, and they sort of turn up. I don't even know. I don't know what type of bees they are. They're called green bees, but they're frozen or something. It doesn't sound like a very good thing for the bees. Yeah.
Eat them?
No, you put it as a bee box outside in your house, and then it's a Father's Day present for your dad to go and look after a hive.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I have not heard about green bees.
Yeah, I'll ask the guy who got him and see how it's going, and pass on where he got him from for you. He was my ex-boss. He got him in the mail from his kids, and he's like, I got a beehive for Father's Day. I was like, what? How? He goes, they're green bees. It's nice and easy.
The only green bees I know of is there's an Indigenous elder that's just down here in Nowra. He's one of the elders of the is it the Wiradjuri people in Nowra? Anyway, a local tribe, and he's got lots of bees. And he was just here the other day, and he was telling me that he puts marijuana in his smoker when they smoke the bees to make them calm. We have to smoke our bees just to sort of reduce the alarm pheromone, or I guess lessen the alarm pheromone going off. And he uses marijuana for his bees, and he reckons it just works every time. And then he said, and then we're always laughing too. So,
It doesn't
it's
matter if you get
crazy.
stung.
So much fun because anyway. Sorry, I digress, but that's the only green part of bees that I've heard about.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, it's funny.
So, if you were giving advice, well, you do give advice on becoming a beekeeper. What's the advice to get, I suppose, to a point of making money and making a career of it as quick as possible, but safely as possible?
As quick and as safely as possible. I think find your niche, find it early. Do your research into the competition, into the challenges, into the hurdles. With every path you take with any industry, there's always going to be hurdles. But looking at the risks and working through the risk management probably really helps, because there's a lot of investment that goes into equipment for certain parts of beekeeping that you can spend a lot of money, and if it doesn't work, it's hard to recoup that. So finding the niche and doing your research before you go down that path, I think, is really important. I think the thing I tried to do initially, which is fine, is diversify a little bit to find what I wanted my niche to be. Um, and I'm glad that I didn't put all my eggs in one basket, because I needed to learn. But since I started, say 6 years ago, we've had fires, with serious drought, fires, 2 years of flooding, and we're now going back into drought season. So the climate has had a massive impact on the business. And if for me it had all been about honey, I would have just dropped it a couple of years ago, I think, because it was really, really tough. But because I diversified into the educational side, the good thing about education is you can do that irrespective of climate, irrespective of COVID lockdowns, because you can do everything online. So I figured, if that's my mainstream income, the honey is just an added bonus. And when I grow the business, then I'll start looking at other avenues like your propolis and things like that. So um, find a niche, reduce your risk as much as possible. I guess that would be the thing that I would say. And then try and stick to it for as long as you can, to find a way to make it work.
And possibly take you on so that you've got more clients. You can teach them.
Yeah, exactly.
Is it possible to give a rough estimate of what, like, if you're starting out, how much is your beehive and bees and your basic equipment and basic essentials? Is there sort of a rough estimate?
Yeah, good question. I probably should be able to roll the numbers off my tongue. I'm in an industry where I work with flow hives, which are definitely more expensive up front. So, for example, a flow hive is about $1,300 Aussie, for the hive. That doesn't include the bees. So then on top of your 1,300, you've got your bees, which are between 2 to 400. So let's say 300 for your bees, roughly. Then you've got all of the sort of supplementary equipment that you need, like hive tools, and all that kind of thing. So I did an estimate recently, for the local primary school to be able to submit a funding request to the government to get funding so that they could get the money to do this. And I worked out that it's about $2,000 to $3,000 for a year, for the first year, to set everything up, to have all of your equipment, be super organized. You could definitely do it for less than that. So you could definitely do it if you don't go down the flow hive path. You could definitely do it for less than that as an upfront cost. But the benefit with a flow hive is that it comes with all these other bells and whistles that actually save money down the track, and have better features that can manage things like, bugs and mites and all that kind of stuff. So, you're probably looking at a couple of grand upfront to get started with a hive, the maths or the back of the envelope numbers that I did when I first started were that if you have a good honey season and you're selling your honey for, say, $30 a kilo, which is definitely at the high end. The main commercial guys are selling it for about 10, but I'm selling it in a little local niche, relatively affluent town of I was going to say Singapore, Kiama. So I'm selling it for about $30 a kilo, but you can probably recoup the cost of the flow hive within the first year if you're having a good honey season, and definitely within 2. And then everything after that is a bonus. So then there's just a little bit of upkeep of, a few $100s a year of equipment and boxes. And it really all depends on how addicted you get to it as to how much you end up spending after that. So keep buying more boxes, getting more bees, needing more land, all of that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
It's funny when something that it's almost like a wonderful hobby that becomes your job that you can kind of get into. It sounds like my husband buying surfboards. He's got to keep going, right? But it's just, it means that you enjoy it. You want to spend the money on it. You're out there, you're having fun, and you're learning, and it's incredible.
My husband's still got a surfboard that he's been trying to make out of wood since we were in Singapore. We've been back in Australia for 7 years now, and the half-made board got shipped back in the shipping container to Australia. It's now in the shed covered in my bee boxes and honey. It's not finished, and I keep saying, when are you just going to give it up? And he's like, I put so much work into it. I'll finish it one day.
It's a project. It's gotta you'll get
There's
there
a
somehow.
constant competition between his fishing gear,
Yeah.
his surfboards, and my bee stuff.
With me, it's camera gear and surfboards, which where do
Oh,
you put
wow.
it? Oh, that's amazing. So, what would be your favorite part of all of this? I know it sounds incredible what you do, but like what would be your pinpoint favorite part of your job?
I think I'd have to say working with kids, because the first time I started working with my girls, my son's never really been into it. He got stung pretty early on and won't go near them now. But the girls, they just get lost in that world, and I love watching them because that's what happens to me. So I feel like I'm almost going back to my childhood, just getting in the moment and being so focused and present. It's like mindfulness. It's almost like it's become my form of meditation, but the kids see it in a way that they're so focused, but they're just pointing out stuff that even I might not even notice, because they see the world so differently. And so I just love working with them, because I'll call the girls from the house and say, girls, I need a queen spotter. Can you come and find my queen? Because I'll get distracted with other things thinking, oh, now what was I going to do with that other hive? And where's that equipment? And what time have I got to go to this appointment? And I'll get distracted, whereas the girls will come and just really focus. It does give me a lot of focus, but for having the kids, just watching them and watching what they see. Like, we spent 15, 20 minutes today just staring with the 3 girls up at the hive at the Kiama Public School. I swear, 15 minutes just staring at this one bee waiting for her to hatch and chewing her way out. And, oh my gosh, she's so cute. Look at her antennae. Oh, there's her eyes. And then they wanted to watch how she moved along the frame once she'd actually emerged. And I thought, this is gold. Like, this is just losing ourselves in nature right here and understanding how they operate. And the more they see that, the more they build that, I guess, respect for bees, and the fact that it's not just one, there's like 20, 40,000 of them that are actually the most powerful organism on the planet that they're just witnessing the growth of right there. So kids just help me see it in a different way and give me so much, I guess, joy just seeing the looks on their faces. So I'd probably say I never wanted to be a teacher. I I'd always just thought I wouldn't be patient enough. I'm not patient enough with my own kids, and I thought, well, I can't be with other people's kids teaching them about beekeeping. But um,
When it's something you love, I think you could tell anybody, right?
yeah, and I don't feel like it's not a job, it's not a chore, it's just a complete joy. So I never think, oh, we've got to wrap this up because I'm getting bored, or I'm never watching the clock. So I guess that's a good sign, right?
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's
But then I've
amazing.
got, my I guess you'd call him my competitor, the other lady down the road who does the queen bee breeding. She couldn't think of anything worse than being in a room with a bunch of kids teaching them about bees, and all she wants to do is work alone and do her thing. So, it's good. It's like a yin and a yang.
Yeah, definitely. I did want to go back to your career and where you started in your career journey because I know it's not a straightforward one, and I think it's an incredible story. So if you could, start with your pilot journey, just to show that career change is something that happens with everybody. I don't think anybody has a straightforward career that we've ever talked to so far. But I think yours is a wonderful one on how you actually got back to coming to Australia and living in Kiama.
Mm. Yeah, it's funny to reflect on it, really, isn't it? And think about those years being at school and being really stressed about what subjects that you were going to choose in year 9 and 10, which would affect what subjects you could do in year 11 and 12, which would ultimately have a big effect on what you could get into at university. Because back then, I went to a private school in Canberra and everybody just went to uni. It's just what you did. Like, would be unheard of for someone to not go to university. And if you didn't know what you wanted to do, well, you just figure it out later. You just got to get into something and go to uni. And so for me to look back on that now, oh my God. So the first, I had a gap year and then I did a year of arts, an arts degree at a uni in Canberra. And, that was a complete waste of time, to be honest. I really just didn't, I'd just come back from a year overseas. I just didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't have that clarity. And when my grandfather, who'd been a real mentor for me and who'd always wanted to be a pilot and couldn't because he was told he had to be a farmer and run the farm, when he passed, and I heard about this course that was a relatively new course that was starting up in Adelaide, basically a applied science degree alongside a pilot's degree, because at that time back then they were trying to move towards an all degree cockpit. They were trying to improve safety standards. They were trying to improve the way pilots and crew work together on a flight to improve the whole aspect of safety. I think it was crew resource management. And they put this degree together, and it meant that I could go and live in a college with some friends who I knew were there in Adelaide, not have to live with my parents in Canberra, go and have fun for a few years and get to learn how to fly planes. And I thought, oh, yes, like my grandfather, this is all he ever wanted to do. He'd be so proud of me. And I thought, why not? I don't know what else I'm going to do. So I toddled off to South Australia and had to wear a shirt and a tie and epaulets to uni for 4 years, which I hated. But the flying part was just so much fun. So much fun. Great bunch of guys. I ended up being the only girl in the class in the year with 15 guys. So that was interesting at times. But I became a pilot and ended up getting a job straight away after uni, flying passengers over to Kangaroo Island and doing the tour guide thing on Kangaroo Island. But back in those days, it was really, really hard to get your hours up. And when I busted my shoulder driving the tour bus on Kangaroo Island, that was part of the deal. If I wanted to fly the planes, I had to do the bus and cook the lunch and be the tour guide for the same passengers that I was flying over on the plane between Adelaide and Kangaroo Island. It's only a 30-minute flight. It's pretty close. And so I busted my shoulder pretty badly. So I had to give that job away. And then I'll never forget, this is back in the days before mobile phones. Well, they were just coming in, brick mobile phones this big. And I decided, right, this is it. I'm going to head up to Northern Territory and I'm going to hassle, Air Kakadu and Kununurra Air and all of these little operators that were just doing tourist flights around northern parts of Australia and Central Australia. So I'd packed up my bags. I had a box of resumes printed out in the back, and I just bought this mobile Nokia phone. And a few days before I was going to leave, I got a phone call from Hazelton Airlines, which is now Rex Aviation in Sydney, saying, do you want to come up for an interview? I must have applied for a job in operations. So I flew straight up to Sydney, had the interview, came back, and they offered me the job straight away. So then instead of driving up north, I decided, well, I'll drive to Sydney, and then, of course, I'll get there and try and get my foot in the door with Hazelton Airlines, and maybe that can be my career path. But unfortunately, what happened, well, not unfortunately, but the day I was driving to the airport for my first shift, because it was shift work, I got a phone call on this big brick mobile phone saying, hey, we're Kununurra Air. We're the ones that you've been hassling for the last year. I was ringing them almost every day trying to get a job. We just rang to tell you that there's an opening if you want to come up. And I pulled the car over and said, you're kidding me. I'm on the way to start this job in Sydney in operations. And I just sat there thinking, okay, this is the sliding doors moment. And I thought, I can't do it. I've already committed. So I ended up staying with the Sydney job. Who knows where I would have been if I would have gone up north. But you make these choices in life, right? And so I did that. I kept flying for a while, but it became harder and harder to get a foot in the door when I wasn't flying constantly all the time, because you just had to get your hours up. And I'd lost a bit of kind of faith in the airline system as well. I was a bit of a free spirit, and I really kind of felt that I wanted to fly more for fun, do a bit of aerobatics and, jumping out of airplanes and stuff like that. I wasn't necessarily really keen on, okay, this is my career path. I want to sit in a cockpit and push some buttons with a few other pilots and just travel from A to B to C, and that be my life. I just couldn't quite get my head around how that worked with my personality. So anyway, long story short, I ended up staying in airline operations. And in fact, one of my favourite subjects at uni was airline operations. So I always kind of had this niggling thing in the back of my head, maybe I'll get into airline management one day. And that was always in the back of my mind. But I ended up getting out of that because I didn't like the shift work after years and years of shift work, and moved into the corporate world, which was all airline related. And then that kind of moved into luxury travel, and luxury travel moved into conferences and meetings and events. And I was running businesses within businesses for that kind of that group of the travel part, and then ended up moving to Singapore to chase my knight in shining armour, who ended up being my husband, and having some big corporate jobs there. And I always said, yep, I'll get back into flying one day. I'll get back into flying one day. And then suddenly I had 3 kids on the ground, you know. So I just kept pushing it back. But I still know in the back of my mind that I will get back to it. But I feel like I've gone down the path that I was meant to go down for now, because I don't think the airline, being an airline pilot, I don't think I was cut out for that. Yeah, so the flying part is something that I definitely miss, but I feel like I wouldn't have found the path that I'm now on had I gone down that path. So it's always interesting, isn't it, to reflect.
But it's also amazing you acknowledged that you didn't like that aspect and made the moves and stayed on that line. It's not that you stuck with the job because it was there. There's all these other options, but you went into operations because it was exciting and interesting, and you enjoyed that side of it. And so many people get stuck in the same thing because they're all like, I went to uni and I've put so many years into this and all of that stuff, but instead you've gone on this amazing journey where you've learned so much more about how the airports and operations and everything run, and then also ended up, looking after the tiniest little airplanes in the world that make the world of a difference. The bees.
I know. There is a bee movie out there with this crazy guy in America who's actually got one of those tiny little ultralights that he's even painted to make it look like a bee, and he's bee obsessed. And when he's not working his bees, he's out flying this little ultralight that looks like a bee in the sky. Completely nuts.
I'll be keeping an eye out on the Kayama Ocean, just looking where's the bee airplane.
Okay. Oh yeah, there's Rachel. Yeah, decided she was actually a bee after all this time.
You mentioned you've done a few different courses and education to get to the beekeeping. Can you just remind me, what was the one that you were doing currently that you loved? You said it was really worth doing.
Yeah, so certificate 3 in beekeeping. So from a vocational education point of view, there's lots of great courses out there now that the government departments are running. New South Wales Government Department of Primary Industry run a heap of agricultural courses. If you look online, there's so many of them. And it's really good for people that don't want to finish school or don't want to go to uni, because it gives them real practical experience. And I was up there recently doing the last part of my course on site. And I'll never forget, I met this girl in the accommodation I was staying in who's a medical vet. She's studying veterinary medicine at Sydney University. I think she's Chinese. Was she Malay? No, she was Malaysian. And she was studying veterinary medicine. It's 6 years, and she was into her third year, I think. And she'd come down to the college, or come up to the college because it's up north, to do her first practical on the farm. And she had to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to get the tractor to round up the cattle to take them into the dairy. And then she had to milk the cows. And she's from, actually, maybe she was, I think she was from China. And she had to milk the cows at 4 o'clock in the morning, and that was her first work experience thing as a medical vet. And she loved it. She absolutely loved it. It was getting her out of the classroom and doing something really fun, right?
But did she
So,
ever actually round up cows? That's pretty hard.
yeah, kind of doing the same thing. We're out there in suits. We're doing plant identification of eucalypts and learning all about this stuff that I never learned anything about. So there's heaps of really cool courses out there. And I'll honestly be encouraging my kids to do any number of those before they launch themselves into a uni degree, to figure out what sticks, what
Definitely.
they really love and what they want to do. And I'll be encouraging them to do what they love rather than just do something because everybody else is doing it, or because it's going to earn you the most money, or.
Yeah, they're the core blocks. It's turning almost your gap year into something that helps you build what you might, or figure out what you want to do essentially. Everybody that's ended up in a career that they love when they're younger, they did, say, an admin course that got them into finance, and then worked at an AC company that seemed to make everything really work and turn into a production finance person eventually. For me, it was, doing actual on-set filmmaking and being able to go to uni and ask all the right questions. And it's the same theme. And I think while you're young, those courses are also they're free and easy. And now New South Wales government, especially for mature students as well, there's lots of free and easy access ones
Yeah,
as well.
getting funded, yeah.
So it's never too late to build those core values. Everyone thinks it's a trade, but it's not. You don't have to be a mechanic. You can go and be a beekeeper. You can get that certification. You can do a forestry one that I was looking into that's really cool, and it's incredible.
And linguistics and all sorts of cultural things, helping refugees integrate into the country. And there's so many. Oh my gosh, the list is so long. And you're right, the government are funding a lot of them now too. So
Yeah,
um, instead of just jumping in headfirst and getting a massive HEC debt that takes you years to pay off, it just makes so much sense now.
it does. And it's also really attractive to employers, the Cert 3s and the diplomas, because they don't want to hire someone just out of school, but having those little qualifications, even as a mature age student, shows that you've put the initiative into it, you've gone through the course. Even if you haven't finished the course and you're still doing it, they're more likely to employ you. So it's really awesome.
Yeah.
It's great. So we're on to our last question at the moment, which is, what is the quote that inspires you the most?
For me, and I think this is something that's evolved over time, my advice now to my kids and to any others that are looking for advice is, if you follow the 3 Ps that I follow, just as one example, mine are purpose, passion, and people. And if I would have known when I was young, trying to figure out what I wanted to do, um, that just finding something that really matters and makes a difference in the world is, to me, so much more important than just doing a mindless job. Having something that benefits others, that makes other people's lives better. So I've always been driven by purpose, and I think, if I'm really honest, that's possibly one of the reasons that I didn't keep flying, because to me personally, it didn't have the purpose that I really needed out of life. And so, purpose, I'm very, very driven by purpose. Passion, I've always been very passionate about everything, but I think the older you get, I think the more passionate you get. I've probably been guilty of accusing my parents of becoming judgmental over time, over passion. You start, as you get older, you become fiercely passionate, or not judgmental, opinionated. Opinionated is the word I'm looking for. So passion, if you're not fueled by something, if it doesn't excite you, then I just think, well, really, what's the point? Life's so short. We've got to make the most of it. We've got to live every day loving what we do. And then the last thing to me is people. And I think, especially after COVID, oh my goodness, the impact that has had on people, because we haven't been able to connect. Just being able to have that connection with people, people and connection brings us together and inspires us and helps give us the energy. We need to feed off each other to have the energy. Trying to just work alone and live alone and not having any energy coming in from anywhere else, you lose you lose your fire. You need a fuel to keep going, and people give me that energy, I think. And I love being inspired by other people and hearing their stories. So to me, if I've got the 3 Ps in my life, purpose, passion, and people, I just feel like you can't go wrong. And I wish that someone would have told me that back when I was younger, instead of saying, well, you've got to go and get a proper job and earn some good money to pay the rent, and you've got to put your kids through school. And that's what I got told when I was young, but I'll be telling my kids the exact opposite. I'll be saying, just go for your 3 Ps, and it doesn't matter what you do, just love it.
Definitely. And I think the thing is, those three things change. You start off in so many different areas of your life. The people change if you move, the passions change with your purpose, and your purpose doesn't have to always be the same purpose for the rest of your life. So
Really?
it's amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's of course very true with kids, because when you've got kids, they become your purpose and your passion and all-encompassing focus for a number of years, until you sort of come out of the haze and then remember who you are, and get your head together and say, right, who am I again? Now I've been through that. Yeah, so your purpose and your passion changes, and being able to work with that and not say, no, 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 I've got to do this. This, and that's what I was talking about. My grandfather, his lot in life was to run the farm, and he wasn't allowed to do anything else but run the farm. He couldn't go off flying because you don't do that, you know. we have the ability, we have this luxury in life now to be able to change tact whenever we want, and nobody's stopping us.
No, exactly. And if you can just keep going and you don't really, you don't care about anyone else who might be telling you otherwise, like with, beekeeping, it's not a conventional job, there would have been some tricky steps there, but you've made it work. You found all these wonderful avenues and the avenues are all very exciting. And you managed to make a living out of it and run through it, which is incredible.
I've got to say, when I told my mother-in-law, I've got a really good relationship with my mother-in-law, and she rang the other day, and I told her that I was doing this interview with you, and she said, "What about?" And I said, "About beekeeping," and she said, "What do you mean? Beekeeping as a career?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And she goes, "Oh." She just didn't get it. And then it just makes you realize that's when the penny dropped, is
Yeah.
that generation can't actually get their heads around the fact that you can turn this into a business and make money and employ people and grow. It's like, because she does bees and she loves it and she totally gets the whole bee thing.
Yeah.
That's not a career.
No, but you do. You have those people in your life that, for me, my mom keeps asking me when I'm going to business school because of like being a filmmaker. It's not, it's a hobby, rocks. Like, how do you? It wasn't until I got a job on a Star Wars movie that she was like, oh, okay. But you do, you have those people that, have that one trajectory of life, and that's that. It's not that anymore. Most people have so many different careers and so many different ambitions, and so many different projects, and it's just, yeah, you're so focused with all of yours. It sounds amazing. I think we could do a part two with you about all of your other projects that you have on, all the other hats that are up and running, your wonderful charity that you're setting up here, and everything essentially. So, but yeah, we are reaching the 1 hour mark. So I think definitely a part two.
So before we wrap up, we're going to put all your contact, your socials into the show notes. But do you want to do a quick shout out to a website or to an Instagram page or anything?
Yeah, how do people find you?
So my website is www.be-inspired.com, I think. be-inspired.com. I was thinking, is it AU as well? I think it's .com. God, I've got to check. And my socials are Be Inspired Co. So no dash, just BEE Inspired CO. That's my social pages.
Brilliant.
Fantastic. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for the bee journey, and we'll hit you up for part two to talk more about being a pilot and charities.
Thank you very much for having me. Great. Love your work, and thank you very much for listening to me.
It's been great. Thank you.
You've been listening to Roxy and Nate. Thanks for tuning in to A to Z Jobs, and always remember it's your career and it's up to you to shape it. So dream big, make bold moves, stay curious, and keep exploring. Check out our website at thecareerchangecoaches.com for more resources, tools, and upcoming training.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode of A to Z Jobs. Remember, your dream career could be just one episode away.